Alright guys, so now what we're going to be looking at is section 6.3. So we're going to be factoring trinomials, so still we're going to be dealing with three terms. But this time our leading coefficient is going to be not equal to 1. So our a is not going to be equal to 1. So in section 6.2 our quadratic expression looked like this. X squared plus bx plus c. Now what's going to happen is we're going to have our a that does not equal 1. So I wanted to do a little bit of a comparison. So I've got 2x squared plus 4x minus 4, and I've got 5x squared plus 8x plus 3. Alright, so for this first one, if I look at it, I can see that I can pull out a GCF. And hopefully you can see that too. So when I pull out my 2, then I've got x squared plus 2x minus 2. And then I can do the same thing that I did in section 6.2 with my a not equal to 1. But right here, if I have 5x squared plus 8x plus 3, is there anything that they have in common? Absolutely not. So this is where I have my a does not equal 1. Alright, and that's what we're going to be focusing on today. There are several different techniques to be able to do this, and there's a lot of guess and check methods. Personally, I don't like guess and check. I like to know my steps. I want to know what works, even if it takes a little bit more time. So that's the way that I'm going to teach it to you guys today. So steps for factoring trinomials when a does not equal 1. First thing you do is you multiply the first and the third term. So you're going to do your a times your c, and I want you to keep the signs. So if you have a negative sign, keep that negative sign there. Step 2, take your answer to step 1 and ask the question that we asked yesterday. What two numbers can I add or subtract to get b? Okay. Step 3, you're going to use the two terms from step 2 and rewrite it as a 4-term polynomial, which a 4-term polynomial will always be solved by grouping. And honestly, it doesn't really matter. You don't have to switch the order. So remember when you're grouping, the first thing you do is you group the two terms by putting parentheses. Then you factor your GCF out of each one. Plus GCF. Okay, and then you factor the entire polynomial if your two binomials match each other. Okay, so let's do this. So to make it real, if we have 3x squared plus 14x minus 5. First thing I see is that I don't have an a equals 1, and I cannot pull anything out. I can't pull out a GCF. So the first thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to take my a times my c, so I'm going to go 3x squared times negative 5, and that's what I'm talking about keeping the signs. So 3 times negative 5 is going to be negative 15x squared. And that is step 1. Step 2 is we have to take this answer that we just found, and we have to decide if we are going to add or subtract to get to my b. The way that you decide that is it's based off of this sign. If it is negative, then you're going to use subtraction. If it's positive, then you're going to use addition. And we have to get to our b, which our b right here is going to be 14, and I want to keep the variable with it. So 14x. So now what I have to do is I have to find the factors. So I'm going to find them over here. So I have to find the factors of whatever I did when I multiplied it. That doesn't matter if it's positive or negative. The positive or negative only applies right here. So factors of 15 are 1 and 15, and 3 and 5. And I've got to use subtraction in order to get to a positive 14. So I would have 15x minus 1x will get me to a positive 14x. So that is step 2. Step 3, we have to take what we just found and we have to plug it in for our b. So we go 3x squared plus 15x minus 1x minus 5. So we're taking what we just found, plugging it into our b so that we can factor by grouping. So whenever we factor by grouping, we group the first two terms, we group the second two terms. You want to make sure and keep if you have a negative sign within the second group, that you want to keep it with that, so that you know that you can pull out a negative. So if I have 3x squared plus 15x, what I can pull out of that is 3x, and when I pull out of 3x, I'm left with x plus 5. Now, I've got negative 1x minus 5. The only thing I can pull out of it is a negative 1, and I'll be left with x plus 5. Alright, I see that I have my binomials that are exactly the same. So I go x plus 5. Then I put my GCFs together, so 3x minus 1, and I'm done. So didn't have to do any type of guessing and checking, but it's a little bit of a process. Okay, let's try the next one together. So we got 2y squared minus 7y plus 6. So when I first look at this, I see that I can't pull anything out. So I'm going to have an a does not equal 1, and I got to go through my first steps. Or I got to go through my 3 steps. So first thing I got to do is a times c. I'm going to make sure and use my signs as well. So I got 2y squared times 6, which will give me 12y squared. That's step 1. Step 2, because it's positive, I know I'm going to use addition, and I have to get to my b, which my b is 7y. Okay, now I find my factors of 12, 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and 3 and 4. And this time I have to get to a positive 7, so 1 and 12 definitely won't work. 2 and 6 gets me to 8, but I've got to get to 7, so 3 and 4 will work. So 3y plus 4y. And make sure that you include those variables. So then I'm going to take this result, I'm going to plug it into my b, so I can make a 4-term polynomial so that I could factor by grouping. So here we go. We go 2y squared plus 3y plus 4y plus 6. So now I have my 4 terms, so I can group. What I can pull out of my first one, the only thing I can pull out actually, is just a y. So I'm left with 2y plus 3. With my second group of 4y plus 6, I can pull out a positive 2, which will leave me with 2y plus 3. My binomials are exactly the same, so I got the common binomial. I know I'm on the right track. 2y plus 3 times y plus 2. Box my answer because I'm done. Now, does it matter what order that these are in? Absolutely not. It's just it's multiplication. I just typically put my common binomial first because I know that I'm on the right track. Okay, let's try another one. So we've got 12 x squared plus 11x minus 5. So I look at it, I see that I can't pull out a GCF, so this is when my a does not equal 1. So first thing I do is I go 12x squared times negative 5, because what I have to do is I have to do my a times my c, and I make sure and keep my signs, which will be negative 60x squared. Now when I look at this, I see that it's negative, so that means I'm going to use subtraction to get to my b, which is positive 11x. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to find my factors of 60, which there's quite a few for this one. We got 1 and 60, 2 and 30, 3 and 20, 4 and 15, and 5 and 12, and then the last one is 6 and 10. So now if I look at this, I've got to figure out what I can do using subtraction to get to a positive 11. 1 and 60 definitely won't get us there. 2 and 30 won't get us there. 3 and 20 won't get us there. But 4 and 15 absolutely will. So I'm going to go 15x minus 4x, because 15x minus 4x will get me to 11. So I take what I just found, I plug it in for my b, and I write my 4 terms. So I've got 12x squared plus 15x minus 4x minus 5. Okay, got 4 terms, so I'm going to group. I'm going to put my parenthesis. So if I have 12x squared plus 15x, what I can pull out of that one is 3x, and it will leave me with 4x plus 5. Now, if I look at my second one, negative 4x minus 5, I don't see anything I can pull out besides a negative, so I can pull out a negative 1, and I'll be left with 4x plus 5. Again, I have my common binomial of 4x plus 5. Then I've got to write my GCFs together, so I go 3x minus 1, and I'm done. Okay, so in the next one, we have 3y squared minus 14y plus 16. So what I've got to do here is I got to look at it, and I can't pull anything out, so I don't have a GCF. So I've got a does not equal 1. So now I go through my 3 steps. So a times c, so I got 3y squared times positive 16, which is going to equal 48y squared. Because it's positive, that means I'm going to use addition to get to negative 14y. Now, let's talk really quick. When I have a negative times a positive, remember when I had the negative times a positive, then my binomials are going to be negative, negative, right? So actually what's going to happen is just like yesterday, I'm going to have a negative and I'm going to have a negative to get to negative 14y. It's still technically addition, because when I have 2 negative numbers, I have to add those together and keep that negative sign. So now I find my factors of 48, which are 1 and 48, 2 and 24, 3 and 16, 4 and 12, and then 6 and 8. So negative 1 minus 48 is not going to get us to negative 14. Negative 2 minus 24 is going to be negative 26, so that's not going to get us there. Negative 3 minus 16 is going to be negative 19, so that's not going to get us there. Negative 4 minus 12 is going to be negative 16. That doesn't get us there, but negative 6y minus 8y will absolutely get us to negative 14. And that's really how it always works out. You're going to have one value that will work every single time. So now I'm going to take what I just found. I'm going to plug it into my b to make 4 terms. So I got 3y squared minus 6y minus 8y plus 16. So I've got 4 terms. So whenever I have 4 terms, then I can factor by grouping. And put my little plus up there. So if I got 3y squared minus 6y, I can pull out a 3y, and I'll be left with y minus 2. Right here, because I have a negative, I know I have to pull out a negative. So if I've got 8y plus 16, I know I can pull out a negative 8. So I'll be left with y minus 2. So I've got my common binomial of y minus 2. And then I've got 3y minus 8. And I'm done. I know it might have been hard to be able to see that you pull out a negative 8 here. But if you do that as side work, like what we did in 6.1 and 6.2, you should be okay to see it. If not, ask me in class. Okay? So now what we're going to do is we have these really scary ones. But hopefully if we simplify it, then it'll be easier to work with. Alright, so for this one I've got 15a squared b plus 22ab plus 8b. Alright, so what I have in each term is a b. And if I look at my numbers 15, 22, and 8, I can't pull anything out with that. But I can pull out a GCF of b. When I pull that out, I'll be left with 15a squared plus 22a plus 8. Alright, now I've got an a does not equal 1, so now I go through my steps. So I'm actually going to rewrite it over here because we're just going to, I'm going to rewrite it over here. So if I got 15a squared plus 22a plus 8, I first do a times c, so this would be 15a squared times 8, which is going to be a bigger number. You're going to end up getting 120a squared. Because it's a positive, I know I'm going to use addition, and I've got to get to my b, which is 22a. Okay, so now I've got to find my factors of 120. Factors of 120, there's a lot of them, so 1 and 120, 2 and 60, 3 and 40, 4 and 30, 5 and 24, 6 and 20, 8 and 15, and the last one is going to be 10 and 12. Okay, so I have to use addition to get to 22. That's definitely not going to work. 2 and 60 is not going to work. 3 and 40 is not going to work. 4 and 30 does not work. 5 and 24 will not work. 6 plus 20 is 26. That does not work. 8 plus 15 will not work. So the only one that works is the 10 plus 12. So we got 10a plus 12a. So now I take this, I replace it in for my b, so I can have 4 terms. So I have 15a squared plus 10a plus 12a plus 8. Now I've got my 4 terms, so I can group. Out of my first group, the 15a squared plus 10a, what I can pull out is a 5a, and it will leave me with 3a plus 2. With my second group, I can pull out a 4, which will leave me with 3a plus 2. I got my common binomials. So what I need to do first is I need to bring down this b. Then I can write my common binomial, so 3a plus 2. And then I can write whatever's left over, so 5a plus 4. And I box my answer. Is it tedious? Yeah, I agree. But this process will work every single time, and you won't have to guess and check anything. Alright, I have one last problem. And this one's definitely going to take a little bit of work. Remember, I need to get it into the ax squared plus bx plus c form. So let me read it for you first, and then we'll approach it together. So we got 6m to the 6th, n, plus 7m to the 5th, n squared, plus 2m to the 4th, n to the 3rd. Alright, so there is a lot of chaos that is going on in this problem. So the first thing that I'm going to look at is I'm going to look at my coefficients. So if I look at these numbers, 6, 7, and 2, there's nothing that I can pull out. But now, let's see if we can pull out an m. So we've got to pull out our least exponent. So I've got m to the 6th, m to the 5th, m to the 4th. So this tells me that I can pull out m to the 4th because that's my smallest. Now I'm going to look at my n's. I've got n squared and n to the 3rd. So I'm going to pull out my smallest, which will just be n. And that is my GCF. So I'll be left with 6m squared plus 7mn plus 2n squared. Okay? So now I've cleaned it up a little bit. I see that my a still does not equal 1. So now I'm going to rewrite it over here so that I can work it out. So we got 6m squared plus 7mn plus 2n squared. Please don't be intimidated by the double variables. I promise it will work itself out. Step 1 is we have to multiply our a times our c, so we go 6m squared times 2n squared, which 2 times 6 will give me 12m squared n squared. And that's why it's really important for you to write down your variables so you don't mess up this process. Since I have a positive, that means I'm going to use addition, and with each term it's going to be mn, mn. And I'm trying to get to my b, which is 7mn, using addition. Alright, I find my factors of 12, 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. And the only thing that's going to get me to a positive 7 is going to be the 3 and the 4. So I go 3 plus 4 will get me to 7. please make sure that you keep your variables just so you can keep it straight. Because if I was to multiply these two, 3 times 4 would give me 12, m times m squared, n times n squared. Alright, so now I'm going to take what I just found, I'm going to plug it back in for my b, so I have 4 terms, so I got 6m squared plus 3mn plus 4mn plus 2n squared. So I've got 4 terms. I'm going to group the first two, I'm going to group the second two, and then I'm going to pull out a GCF. So in 6m squared plus 3mn, I can pull out a 3m, and I'll be left with 2m plus n. I've got 4mn plus 2n squared. I can pull out a 2n, and I'll be left with 2m plus an n. My terms are going to be exactly the same, so I'm going to come up here and I'm going to go m to the 4th n times my common binomial of 2m plus n. Then I'm going to go 3m plus 2n, and then I'm going to box my answer. I would highly suggest to rewind this problem and to walk yourself through it again, just to make sure that you get this straight. So now what I need for you to do is I need you to do your homework from your textbook. It took me about 1.5 pages to do it. Please take your time and work yourself through it. If you have any questions, make sure that you write them down and bring them to class with you the next time I see you. Thank you.